Disaster in India's auto sector. There's been a 30% erosion of sales of passenger vehicles in August, with commercial and two-wheeler sales down as well. According to the Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers, the market has not responded to the measures initiated by the government and consumer sentiment continues to be low. They believe that there is clearly a trust deficit in lending money to auto dealers and that this remains a huge problem.
ऑटोमोबाइल इंडस्ट्री अभी बहुत ही 30% घाटे में चल रही है और 90% जितने भी फैक्ट्रीज हैं मैन्युफैक्चरिंग यूनिट्स हैं ऑटोमोटिव इंडस्ट्री के, वो सब 50% या उसके बिलो रेट पे चल रही है. बहुत जॉब लॉसेस हुए हैं, 3.5 लाख करोड़ से भी ज़्यादा जॉब लॉसेस हो गई हैं. तो ये इसके लिए बहुत ज़रूरी है कि जीएसटी का रेट कम किया जाए, खास करके टू व्हीलर कंपोनेंट्स में और टू व्हीलर्स में जीएसटी एकदम कम हो जानी चाहिए, उसको 5% पे ले आ जाना चाहिए.
All right, well, a real crisis, and I think we can safely use that word now. It's not a downturn. I think it's an out-and-out crisis given these numbers in August, which seem to be worse than the numbers a few months earlier. Joining us now, my colleague Siddharth Vinayak Patankar, our editor of Auto across the NDTV group. Vinkesh Gulati is Vice President of the Federation of Automobile Dealers Association. We'll be joined by the former MD of Maruti Suzuki, Jagdish Khattar, in a moment from now, and the independent business consultant, Sunil Alag, joins us as well. Siddharth, let me come to you first. What SIAM, the Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers, said today, and I quote, is that the sales report coming from various companies for the month of August has been very dismal, with over 30% erosion of sales of passenger cars. The commercial vehicle and two-wheeler sales are also significantly negative, indicating that the market has still not responded to the various measures initiated by the finance minister last month. What were those measures, and why, in your mind, has the sector not responded?
All right. So first things first, let's get some things into perspective here. What we were talking about is not something that's new. It's been building up, and it's not just, sort of accelerated in the last 30 days. This is something that's been building up for quite some time. Some of those measures, which I'll get to in a second, of course, there was a certain hope that came from that. But let's not be surprised by any of these numbers. I mean, what we saw happening in May, June, then in July. In July, we were already talking about historic lows. There was certainly not going to be any kind of a magic wand, even if you had drastic measures coming in to fix the situation in August. Now let's go to those measures themselves. Yes, of course, don't forget that the focus of the government has right now is not just on the auto sector. It's about trying to revive the economy. Some of the things that were specifically directed at the auto sector, yes, were certain demands that were put forth by the various industry associations, but everybody sort of acknowledged the fact that, look, we're happy with some of this that's been talked about, bringing down interest rates, bringing more liquidity into the system. These are sort of piecemeal, very small measures. What we're really looking for now, given just the extent of the crisis, is something big bang. If you don't take something very drastic at this point, nothing's going to change, certainly not going to change enough to try and sort of save or exacerbate or not exacerbate the situation. Because we're talking about huge job losses. We're talking not just about falling sales, but we're talking about the domino effect this is now starting to have on the ancillary industries, and then, much, much further out from there as well. I mean, we've got a situation that's been snowballing, and really nothing has been done to sort of pull it back. And so, like I said, yes, there is certain hope that, some of those measures, firstly, not going to show up in just 20 days' time. So yes, maybe some of that will show up. The festive season's coming up, so maybe that will help bolster some of this. But it's certainly not a crisis that's going to disappear anytime soon.
Vinkesh, the other point mentioned by SIAM today, the series of announcements on credit availability and reducing the cost of credit that were made do not seem to have percolated down to NBFCs, which support the bulk of finance for the automotive industry. It's the lack of money, it's the lack of finance, directly linked to the demand scenario right now. Is this the problem? If there was more cash in the system, then
so this is not the whole problem, but obviously this is a part of a problem. So when we represented the finance minister, we did discuss that the kind of liquidity and the retail finance which was there before is now lacking. So this started with this NBFC fiasco since after ILFS, and then RBI tightening the NBFC process. So actually what has happened that in the market, NBFCs ceased to exist in the finance. Before there were around 8 to 10 aggressive NBFCs which were there lending to the retail customers, which there is only 1 or 2 left, and those 2 are very, very cautious. They are actually risk averse. So the problem is banks have agreed. So the rate of interest of banks have gone down because they have been now pegged up with the Ripple. and additionally they have moved with processing fees is 0 now. But the problem is banks normally do finance to the people who are good, who have good income tax, who have good CIBIL rating. But if you talk of the rural customer, the semi-urban customer, where the papers and the books are not that great, they work on daily wages or a employee of a private company, they are not good at all these CIBIL ratings and all. Their NBFC used to be always the big thing. But with the RBI intervention and the finance ministry intervention, yet it hasn't happened down the light yet.
Okay.
Unless and until that happens, the kind of retail push we want from the liquidity or the finance front is not there.
Mr. Khattar, again, the industry wants the government to consider reducing the GST rates from 28% to 18%. Is this a quick fix?
Listen, I have always felt that in the type of situation that prevails today, any particular sector cannot get out of it till there is an overall improvement in sentiment and future. Now, look at the cars. We are talking about cars. I mean, if there is a problem, that problem is linked to so many other things, and not merely GST or some taxes or all those are concerned. Certainly, there will be a marginal difference, but if the shortfall is 20, 25, 30%, then there are other issues which have to be solved. So, coming back to the point, I think we have to be in line with the overall sentiment. You have 30-40% people who are buying for the first time, another 50-60% are either upgrading or another vehicle. If 10% of them decide to postpone, what can you do about it? The sentiment, jobs, future, all these things are linked. So, coming back to my view, I think we have to we are a part of the overall sentiment, and car is one thing where sentiment plays a very important role. Car is one thing where 30, 40, 50% of the people can postpone by a month, 2 months or a year. They need not upgrade or they need not replace. So, I think it has to be in line with the overall sentiment.
Okay.
And very doubtful, I am very doubtful if any specific action taken for automobile will make a large difference.
All right. Sunil Alag, one of the points which has been mentioned is the scrappage policy, an integrated incentive based scrappage policy covering all segments of the auto industry. The government has said that they were going to consider this, but in terms of details, this was something promised by the finance minister. The government has not really come out with these details. It's not been been implemented. Therefore, does there not require to be much more clarity from the government in terms of key policy decisions going forward in this sector? Mr. Alag.
I'm going to first immediately say that yes, auto is down and jobs have got lost, and I'm really sympathetic about it. But I'm not sympathetic at all when people say that this has been happening for the last 8-9 months and the auto industry has continued to produce. It's exactly like an industry when there's a drought coming in, and I'm on the board of a company which makes pesticides, insecticides, and if they don't see a drought coming up and we carry on producing it, we are going to have stocks. So what is the industry which has got the world's best people in it? And if you read Subbarao's article, who was I think he's come out with one, and he was running Hyundai before that, and he says, look, everybody even in America went with a begging bowl to the government. What has the industry done? I mean, about whatever is going to happen. You take a loss for 1 year, cut out your production, so it requires both ends to work.
No, but Mr. Alag, that means lakhs of job losses.
To reduce prices.
How can you tell the industry to stop?
Then we get out of it.
How can you tell people that, look, you're going to be out of a job?
Yeah, I'll come back again. It's
10 lakh jobs might go at this rate, sir.
How can you tell people why only can you just, Vishnu, you're not listening to me. What about other industries where there are job losses? Why only auto industry?
10 lakh job losses?
The whole economy. I have always been one, until demand doesn't go up, until demand doesn't go up, any of this is not going to work. You have to put money in the hands of the consumer. You have to change the perception in the economy, and then not only the auto industry. So far, government has only taken steps to help industry. They've done nothing at the demand end, and I've always been saying it from the time of the budget, that look, until the 200-300 million people in the middle income group unless you put money into their hands, unless you change the
Okay.
sentiment, they are not going to go out and buy the cars.
Okay,
So all
I
this
agree
will
with you,
mean
sir.
your
I
inventory
agree
will come
with you
down.
about that
What
demand
happens
bit.
next year?
But Mr. Alag,
That's all.
I tend to disagree with you somewhat about what has the auto industry done. That, let me come back to Siddharth about that. Maruti total sales in August down
Yeah,
33%.
how did America get out of it? They went to
No, but
they
sir,
went
let's
to
not
the president
generalize,
of the
sir.
United States many years
Maruti
ago,
down
help us, and the
33%,
government
Tata's
said,
down
"This is your
58% year on
problem.
year.
Deal with it."
Mahindra and Mahindra down 25% year
No,
on
you're
year.
down. I
Hero
agree.
Motor
I
Corp
agree.
down 21% year on year.
Please read
if I may.
Subarao's article. He says if you made money, if you have made money for the last 10 years, take a loss 1 year. Learn to live with the
But
fact
sir,
that you're
the
going to make a loss
companies
next
tend
year.
to operate on the basis of
And if
profits.
you're not
no?
willing
And
to
that's
make a
across
loss
industries,
and
I
not
think, if I may
wait,
just
it's
jump
up
in
to
here.
you.
Okay,
ahead
Mr.
and
Alag,
do it.
half a second,
Go with
sir.
the begging bowl to the government and say the government is going to get you out all the
Actually,
time.
they haven't gone with the
Exactly. I mean, that's the point I want to
That's
make.
all
That
I'm
we
saying.
cannot
So-
really draw a parallel with the American industry because they asked for a bailout. They asked for cash infusion from the government. That's not what's happening here. Here we are asking for, we are seeing the government being asked rather for a tax cut, which the government was reluctant to do. Let's be honest. But yes, yesterday we've had the finance minister saying that, look, now we're happy to take this to the GST Council. So September 20th, when they meet, we'll find out whether they agree to a 5% cut or a 10% cut. That's not the point, though. The other thing which I will say, I would like to contend with what Mr. Alag said is that, yes, of course, it's true that any industry should see headwinds and try and sort of understand where things are going and how they're not improving. But there have been production cuts. It's not as if, they're carrying on churning to full capacity. There have been huge production cuts. A lot of the contractual labor has already been fired, which is where those 3.5 lakh jobs have actually already
gone.
disappeared from. The dealerships have lost huge numbers of some of their contractual workers as well. So it's not as if they haven't done things to sort of scale back. Now, you can argue the degree or the level of that scaling back. But yes, some of that has happened. It's now reached that crisis sort of critical point where even that's not enough. And when you said 10 lakh jobs, by the way, that's just the immediate industry. Try and look at the associated jobs, and then it goes to a figure of 80 lakhs, which is staggering.
Yeah. In terms of the industry that you work so closely with, how is this affecting people on the ground immediately right now?
See, actually, the dealership community is the actual community which is on the ground, and we employ people where they live actually. We don't displace them, and that is the biggest strength what we have. And if we remember a year back, we were growing. So with the growth expectation, we expanded our infrastructure, like you said, and we increased our manpower with the expectation, but the economy went down, the demand went down. So obviously, all the growth has disturbed our overall working style. As you said, obviously everybody works for the profit, but the expected growth what had to be seen, the way India was growing, the way auto industry was growing, the same pattern even the dealership grew.
Right.
Our manpower, which was around 20 lakh, went up to 25 lakhs
Right.
in expectation that the growth of sale will be
And
there and that
didn't
would be
match.
there. But obviously, when the degrowth started, nobody can continue to keep those kind of manpower for a long term.
Okay. Vinkesh, I take the point that you're mentioning. I'm completely out of time, but I think what you are referring to is job losses in
Yeah,
the sector,
obviously.
which has taken place. I'd like to thank all of you very much for joining us. Sadly, these numbers aren't going to improve anytime soon. One just hopes that there is some sort of cheer in the industry during the festive season, when typically there is cheer, sales do tend to go up. For now, we'll take a short break. I'll be back tomorrow at 9 p.m. Till then, goodbye.